Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a restful evening, because it's time for another entry into the Heroes of Legend DLC proposal series. Without further ado, let's begin. While the vampire counts may be a dangerous force to the weak southlings of the Empire, covered yesterday, every wise man knows that the true threat to all creation awaits in the horrific realms of chaos. Among the countless demons and monsters of that terrifying land, only the mightiest champions of the dark gods can hope to survive and rise to power. But who among them is best suited to represent the warriors of chaos under any lord? To march out and rally the hordes of madmen to under their banner? There is no one more worthy, of course, than the very harbinger of the end times himself, Vardek Krom. Born to the legendarily fierce Khul tribe that reside in the Chaos Wastes, Krom grew to great esteem quickly, as his skill with an axe was second to none. Able to effortlessly switch his combat style to counter whatever opponent he may face, by his 30th summer, Vardek had become the most feared warlord among the Khul, and none could best him in battle. Yet, despite his slew of victories and uncontested skill with an axe and sword, Krom the Conqueror was plagued with nightly dreams sent by the dark gods themselves. Every time he would sleep, his mind would conjure up images of a dark figure raising up a blade that radiated out hateful flames of immense power. No shaman or seer could explain these constant visions to the exalted champion, and he became enraged at the enigma plaguing his life. This search for answers continued until one day word arrived that a group of riders were crossing Vardek's territory without paying tribute to the conqueror. This insult ignited the depressed warrior's spirits, and he rode out to confront these interlopers, dismounting to await them on foot with his collection of weapons eager for blood. When the riders finally arrived, they were a collection of Chaos Knights guarding a foreboding man who sported an immense horned helm and radiated an aura of power. Unwilling to back down, Vardek challenged the group to ritual combat if they sought to pass through his lands without paying him tribute. One by one, the knights stepped forward, only for each to be beaten down by Vardek Krom's unmatchable skill. No magical trinket or bizarre mutation offered salvation from the Conqueror's sheer ability to disarm and disable his foes, and before long the snow was stained with blood. Finally, the horned leader seemed to have run out of patience and dismounted off his immense demonic steed, stepping forward without even drawing his blade. Gobsmacked by this incredible level of arrogance, Vardek brought his axe and sword whirling through the snow in a flurry of blows to cut down this stranger. Yet every time Krom thought his weapons would connect, the stranger would casually dip or weave around the steel before landing a blow using only his gauntleted fists. Despite wearing chaos armor himself and being a hardened warrior, the Conqueror couldn't help but gasp in pain every time the stranger struck him. The man's strength was truly absurd, but his skill and speed made even the peerless Krom stagger back in shock. Finally, Vardek could carry on no more and slumped to one knee before the stranger grabbed him by the throat and lifted the Conqueror full off the ground. Drawing a sword, which when unsheathed erupted into hellish flame, Krom realized that this man had been the one in his dreams. The stranger revealed himself as Archaon, and spoke about how he was nearly done in his quest to claim the title of Everchosen, so that he might bring about the end times. Impressed by Vardek Krom's display against the swords of chaos, Archaon offered the Kurgan a place at his side. Knowing that this was his destiny, the Conqueror eagerly accepted and joined the Swords of Chaos. Here he would stay for a few short years, before the Everchosen would send him away, tasking Krom with traveling all across the Chaos Wastes and the Northern Darklands, to break all the different Kurgan tribes to his will. Now declaring himself the Herald of Archaon, Krom eagerly accepted and went about his assigned task. No longer one of the Swords of Chaos, the Conqueror would travel for roughly a decade as a mighty warlord once more, in the name of Archaon, during which time he would have his famous duel against the Orc war boss, Grimgor Ironhide. Finally, at the head of a colossal host, and proclaiming that the end times were nigh, Crom the Conqueror met once more with Archaon, who had since claimed the crown of domination, and been recognized as the Everchosen by Be'lakor, the first Demon Prince. Here, he would be charged with leading the vanguard of the Legions of Chaos, as they descended south to tear apart Kislev and hurl themselves against the Auric Bastion protecting the Empire. When the Sorcerous Wall of Gold finally had a small gap temporarily torn open thanks to the Changeling, it was Vardek Crom who led in an entire host of demons, beastmen, and mortals in the name of the Dark Gods. No longer a mere herald, the now harbinger of the end times would seek to capitalize on this weakness in the Empire's defenses, and fought a massive battle against the hastily assembled defenses. Here he would wreak havoc unopposed, until he met his doom at the combined hands of Luther Huss and a strange young man named Vultan. That ended up being a lot longer than I thought it would be, honestly. Anywho, now that we're done with discussing the lore of Vardek Crom, let's talk about how this character might be acquired during a Warriors of Chaos campaign. I think the best way would be once the player constructs the ability to recruit Chosen, that particular structure, he unlocks Vardek Crom, who would just appear next to the Legendary Lord's Horde. Or maybe it could just be when you reach a certain level, he'll turn up to serve as the player's herald. Archaon, of course, should have a unique advantage, where as soon as he starts his campaign at level 1, Vardek Crom is just right there ready to go. Everyone else would, of course, need to earn his respect. When it comes to his major features on the battlefield, the massive gimmick to Crom the Conqueror is that he actually has the unique ability to switch out his weapon set during battle, which is known as the Way of the Warrior. This is actually the main reason I advocate for him as a paid DLC character as opposed to like just a free LC throw-in, as it would allow for an interesting development of this feature to have a organized effort to, create characters who can like switch out their equipment. Because one thing I want to note is while this series is mostly focused on the idea of just adding more legendary heroes to the game, the thing is, whenever you're dealing with a DLC character or feature, meaning something you're going to pay for, it should be something that pushes the entire game forward. It shouldn't just be like adding a character who doesn't bring any new features or any new tools into the game. Because at that point, they should really just be a free LC if they're not going to be doing anything super interesting. Which is probably something I should have elaborated more on past videos. But even though Vardek Crom isn't like the craziest different character compared to some others, if he were to, say, bring in a legitimate ability that allows for interesting weapon swapping, or like his stats change and he like literally changes the weapons he's wielding, he puts away his axe and brings out his shield or whatever, I think that feature is fundamentally what you're paying for, because it takes development time and work to make that function within the game. But while sure, it's giving you Vardek Crom, that also opens the door for other characters and other features that could be used in the future. Whenever you add something to the game, that should be a building block that you're using to continue to make everything better, not just the one thing you're looking at. So with that little thing out of the way, let's keep going on what Vardek Crom should be doing in battle. So for that Way of the Warrior ability, Vardek should essentially be able to switch between wielding two hand weapons in the form of his signature sword and axe style, and then switching to having his axe and shield out. This ability should have a brief wind-up time to activate as he changes his equipment, perhaps like a 3 to 5 second cast time. This should also be disabled when he's actually fighting in close combat, as obviously switching battles while you're in the midst of trying to kill and not be killed is probably really dumb. There should be a notable difference in his stat line and function when in either form. So like for his dual wielding style, he should specialize in dealing lots of damage and landing deadly strikes. So this form should carry a very high melee attack and weapon strength system, in addition to maybe more whirling attacks that have larger, areas that he strikes. So he's hitting lots and lots of enemies and is able to cleave through large blocks of enemies or just deal a ton of damage to an isolated target. Meanwhile, his shield stance should have the obvious benefits of extremely high melee defense, very high missile block chance, and perhaps even like a physical resistance buff. This would allow him to focus on survivability so that he could simply focus on holding the line and bolstering the leadership of nearby troops, or just keeping really powerful characters locked in close combat with him. Beyond that, his main draw should simply be having an absolutely amazing stat line, even when compared against Chaos Lords. Just a shockingly high melee attack and melee defense stat base. I'd also like to see him receive maybe like a Chaos Steed mount, which he didn't have on tabletop for some reason, despite the fact he, used to ride around with the Swords of Chaos, which are a knight unit, so he should have the ability to be a Chaos Knight. I guess they just didn't want to bother with giving him a horse in tabletop, but I think he should have one. In addition, I think actually a cool thing we could see him get, maybe to call back to his Grimgor day, is because the whole thing about his battle with the Grimgor is he essentially just held Grimgor off long enough for his army to get everything done around him. So maybe a cool thing would be if he's in that shield mode where he's just trying to survive and keep the enemy entangled, maybe he could essentially have like an entangling type ability where as long as he's dealing damage or landing hits on a enemy character, like say, I'm wording that weird, whenever he hits an enemy character while in shield stance, maybe he could lower their speed, lower their melee attack, and lower their weapon strength as he's just he's just all busy parrying and keeping them occupied and making it hard for them to get away from him, even though he's not dealing really a ton of damage. I think that could be a really cool way to do that. Moving on to his weaknesses. Obviously, Vardek Krom would have the typical Chaos Warrior issues, so he should be pretty slow moving across the battlefield, in addition to very, very expensive, at least in like a multiplayer scenario. In addition, while he would be an extremely competent warrior thanks to his high stats, Krom should probably not really have any major abilities outside of just having those good stats and maybe, trying to keep a character locked in with him, at least in multiplayer. This isn't a character that you want to give like some crazy nerf ability where he like makes a enemy character able to be killed in 2 hits or able to like explode to get people off of him or something. Like he should just have killer stat lines, and maybe when he's, in shield stance, he's able to make it a little hard to get away from him. But other than that, I think he should be mostly focused on being able to customize to suit the situation. However, when it comes to his design when running around in campaign, I could definitely see things opening up for Krom the Conqueror as he levels up. One skill that he should be able to unlock fairly early, I think, in campaign, probably not in multiplayer, should be called Immense Pride, which this should be a passive similar to Grimgor's new passive, which is that he should have like maybe a small ward save and an increase to charge speed when he's within distance of an enemy character. Maybe like 30 or 40 meters, he kind of speeds up a little bit as he goes to engage. Another skill I'd like to see him unlock at a very high level should be Herald of the End Times, which could either be an active or passive ability that perhaps either greatly bolsters nearby allies or debuffs nearby enemies. Perhaps it could make Warrior of Chaos units near Krom immune to psychology. That would be pretty sexy and is something a lot of people want, is immune to psych chosen. So maybe Krom could do that once he's a high enough level. Or if you wanted it to be a debuff, perhaps it could cause enemy units to suffer a notable leadership penalty as Vardek Krom just goes on and on about how the end times are at hand and he's just curb stomping everybody. Finally, beyond the typical character upgrades, I think it'd be fitting for Vardek Krom to have blue tree skills focused around training, scavenging, which is the getting extra money or favor from successful battles, assassination, assaulting units, and assaulting garrisons. In addition to perhaps having unique skills that vastly decrease the public order of any province he's in, along with vastly increasing chaos corruption. I mean, I'm talking about something like his reduced public order should be something like, if it had 3 tiers, the first tier should give you 5, the second tier should give you 10, and the third tier should give you 15 or 20. It should be huge debuffs to public order and massive increase to chaos corruption. Because he's the herald of the end times. He's the guy that, if he shows up in your area, you're in big trouble. Now, we're on to the final section, which is, of course, appearance. Crom the Conqueror is actually a fairly well-detailed character due to his significance during both the end times and the original version, which is the Storm of Chaos. He has a very nice little tabletop model, so that should probably be the inspiration for his overall appearance. The official end times color scheme for his model is actually pretty unique compared to a lot of other Warriors of Chaos, as he seems to heavily revolve around a gold thing. Kind of like the same gold as Archaon's helmet, which I find pretty interesting. In any event, that's going to be it for the Warriors of Chaos, just focusing on old Vardek. So I hope you all let me know what you think of the character. Do you think Vardek Crom is the guy you would want to see joining up with Archaon the Everchosen, or, unlocking if you're playing as Kolek or somebody else? Do you think it should be somebody else? If so, who do you think it should be? And did you like the sound of the features I was presenting here? Or do you think that maybe there's something I'm missing or something that doesn't make sense? Let me know in the comment section down below. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. And I'm excited for tomorrow, because tomorrow is the last Warhammer 1 race before we head into the Warhammer 2 Heroes of Legend races. In any event, hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.